This episode of Drawn to It podcast is brought to you by Cat Animation Online Art School, offering their students high-quality mentoring by experienced, caring professionals in animation, story design, and much more at very affordable prices. Beginning and advanced classes and mentoring slots for the spring semester of 2021 are forming now. Don't miss the opportunity to learn and grow from Disney-trained animators and artists currently working in the animation industry. Visit www.cat-animation.com for details about their unique school, their distinguished faculty, and how to apply for future classes or mentoring. They look forward to working with you in the near future. All right, happy Monday. We are back, people. Welcome back to Drawn to It podcast. Today I have Gary Andrews on. He's going to talk about his tribute film that he made during the period when his wife passed away. He's going to talk about his industry experience working for Disney and other studios right here on Drawn to It podcast.
Drawn to it, sketching doodles in your textbooks. In the corners making animation flip books. Writing stories, then turn them into comic shocks. Get out the clay, I'm a sculpt Garth Brooks. It doesn't matter how you create, cause you're drawn to it, drawn to it. It only matters you create when you're drawn to it, drawn to.
So, getting into it, if you could give us kind of the abridged version of your transition from high school graduate into going into your journey working within the animation industry, that first year or two, what that looked like for you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I left school. I'm in the UK, so our sort of school system's slightly different, I think, to yours. But so I left what we call sort of school at 18, and did a 1 year what they call foundation course, a general art course where I studied all sorts of different art. Went on from there to a degree at art college, a 3-year degree at art college, where I specialised in illustration. And I always used to get the projects done really quickly. They'd give us 2 weeks to do a job, and I'd get it done in like 2 days, and then have all this time to kill. So I wanted to make films, and they were like, "Well, you're on a art course, you're supposed to be drawing stuff, you can't go and make movies." And I was like, "Oh, all right. Well, you've got an animation rostrum in there." And yes, we have. No one teaches it here. Yeah, but does anyone know how to load it? One of the teachers knew how to load the rostrum. So I basically just used to make films on there because it was the closest I could get to actually making movies.
Wow.
And they would let me. So I made some films at art college. Then when I left, I sort of left in the summer, dotted around for a bit doing the odd illustration job. And then I thought I ought to try out animation. I did a bit at college. So I thought I went around with my portfolio and stuff thinking I'll get a bit of design work in animation. And I wandered into a studio one day and said, there was one little bit of work. So the first animation job I got, I went into a place and they said, "Do you want to do some animation?" I went, "Oh, okay." And I worked for a couple of weeks on a pop video for something called Rupert and the Frog Song for Paul McCartney years and years and years ago. And I did a week in betweening Firefly's bottoms. And then and then I went to another studio and I went in with my stuff, and I went in thinking, "Oh, I'll get some design." And they said, "Oh, we like this. You like your films as well. One of our guys is popping in the hospital. Would you like to sit in his chair for 3 weeks and learn a bit?" And I went, "Yeah, great." And that 3 weeks turned into 3.5 years at that studio.
That's amazing.
I just sort of fell into animation, really. It was not anything I ever thought I'd do.
I've said this before on the podcast. I am constantly amazed. It seems the more talented the guests I get on, like, that's a bad way of putting it. The more experienced guests who have really worked their way up to the top of the mountain kind of thing, the more I hear they just fell into animation. It's so strange. Like I I know for me, like I remember being 5 years old on the living room floor, watching Ferdinand the Bull, thinking I want to do that, right? So you have those people, and then you have people like yourself, like uber talents who we just fell into it.
Well, the background, I mean, I loved animation. I loved watching it, but I never thought it was something I would necessarily do because I like drawing, and I've drawn ever since I could hold a pencil. But I like drawing comics and illustrations, classical illustration. I loved making movies, and I had never, I mean, it shows you just how dense I was. I'd never thought of putting the two together. I thought for a minute that would be something that I would do as a drawer. Oh, drawing and filmmaking. Wait a minute, that's animation. It just never occurred to me. I was never grew up the fan. I just sort of liked watching them, but I liked watching live action more and just happened to be able to draw. And I didn't make that connection. It was idiotic, really. And then when I started doing it for a job, it was suddenly like this road to Damascus light. Suddenly, and it's like, oh God, that's how it works. Yeah, of course, idiot. And then suddenly discovered that was I loved it, and actually I had an aptitude for it.
Fantastic, man. That is. That's amazing. And when you started down the studio path, as your momentum built up and you're working in more and more studios, bigger and bigger productions, did you, at that point, when did you get a sense of the appreciation of how hard the art form was to really get good at?
I was very lucky in that my first boss in that studio that I worked in for 3.5 years was an animator, an Argentine animator called Oscar Grillo, and he was incredibly talented. And he had this attitude of just do it, and if it's not right, just do it again. And he never told me it was hard. So, and because I didn't come from a fan background, I didn't realize it was supposed to be. So I just sort of would do a thing and then do it again and do it again till it was, and it just sort of happened. I guess later on, as you've been doing it for a while, you start taking more responsibility on your shoulders. You suddenly realize that there is a bit of pressure to get it right, and to be sort of more accurate with it or whatever. But it never was one of those things that you're going, oh my God, this is so hard, I've got to really work. I just always had that attitude of, oh, it didn't work. Oh well, I need to change it and make it better. So I was very lucky to have that as an introduction to the business, I guess. It was probably about 10 years in. I was working at Disney Movie Tunes in London. We had a studio over here. I worked with them for about 1.5 years as a supervising animator there. And we'd have younger assistants come in who were animation fans, who'd grown up with it and wanted to do it all their lives. And I'd give them a sequence to do, and I'd say, right, you got to do this bit, and the character's lip syncing, and they're blah, blah, blah. And they'd look at me with this fear in their eyes and go, lip sync? Oh, that's quite hard. And I say, that's what I did on my first day, and no one told me it was hard, so I just did it. So it was like, don't think of it as hard, just think of it as something to do. So it was at that point I suddenly realized, oh, maybe I ought to sort of look at this a bit more seriously.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say that you weren't looking at it seriously. I say you were looking at it through the prism of no anxiety, because when those of us who are like, oh, I want to do that since I was 5, and we get into it, I mean, we build it up in our heads to be such a thing, and then we're into it, and the last thing we want to do is screw up or look like imposters.
Yeah, and I think and that's again when I say I was very lucky to have the sort of boss I had, and it's always the sort of person I've tried to be when I've been in a position of some sort of authority, whatever, on a job, is that if somebody's struggling or finding it hard, is not to come down on them and say, well, get it right, you're doing it wrong. Just say, that's okay. It's not heart surgery. It's just drawing. No one's going to die if you get this scene wrong. Just do it again, and just do it better. And it's kind of it's being told the right things by the right people at the right time, I think, can make a huge difference. And the reduction of anxiety comes from the people who you're working for or under, rather. I would think. Yeah.
It's the more people I talk to through this podcast, the more I feel like I'm part of a tribe of anxiety-ridden people. So many of us have imposter syndrome, almost stage fright when it comes to you know.
Oh, the imposter syndrome's real. I mean,
Yeah,
I've been doing
totally.
this job now for, God, what is it, 37 years, I think, and I still get that.
Yeah,
I still
yeah.
think one day I'm going to get found out.
Exactly. And I've even heard Glenn Keane talk about times he felt that way too. And although you never wish for somebody to go through your pain, there is a bit of relief when you find out somebody is, because you're like, I'm not the only one. There's a sort of comfort in that.
Yeah.
Because you don't feel like such an oddball.
Well,
right?
other artists I've spoken to who say, "Oh yeah, we all have it. Oh man, it's just so normal. It's so normal."
Yeah.
Because I think anything that you do where you're doing what's regarded as a talent, as something that people who aren't in the business look at you and go, "Oh, it's so clever. How'd you do it? I could never do that." And you're just doing it because it's all you can do. And you're
Yeah.
thinking, well, I
Yeah.
can't do what you do. But it's something that comes naturally. You always fear that someone who's higher up the chain, up the food chain, is going to turn around and see you and say, "Actually, no, you're not that good."
Yeah.
It's. I think it's only natural.
Yeah. And
you know,
sometimes it happens that way.
it does. And the thing is, there are
Yeah.
people out there. I mean, God, for all of us who are told that we're good at a thing by people, we are always looking at other people's work and going, "But they're proper good," and
Right.
and I think that it's I think that's natural. And the day you're the person sitting there going, "No, I'm the best at this," is the day that really you ought to just go away, because
Completely.
there's always somebody better.
I agree. I tell my kids that all the time because I want them to be prepared, and to not have that ego of, "Ah, I'm so awesome." Okay, be proud of your achievements,
Yeah.
but just know that just over the horizon there's somebody
There's
who's
somebody better.
so far ahead of you.
I always say
So-
to my kids, whatever it is they're doing, and I think this again, it comes from the expectation of how I was sort of taught by these sort of mentors back in the day. I always say to my kids, I don't expect you to be the best at anything you do. I just expect you to do your best.
Yes, I
And if
say
you're
the
doing your
same
best,
thing.
that's good enough. But if you're not
Yeah.
doing your best, then you're undervaluing yourself. Do your best. It doesn't have to be the best,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important to be able, at the end of the day, to not have the regret of not knowing. So if you try and you fail, you tried, right?
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
go to bed at night and say, "Oh, maybe I should have gone for that audition, or maybe I should have applied at this studio," or because you're left wondering because you didn't.
Yeah, take the risks. It's worth it. And
Yeah.
as I say, we're not heart surgeons.
Right.
The worst thing that can
Right.
happen is a drawing doesn't go very well, and someone goes, "No, I know somebody that can do that better." You can go, "Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough. I'll go and work."
But-
Why
Why do you think it is we build it up to be so important? Like when you get talking shop with peers,
Yeah.
like it's so dead serious. There's such a respect for the art form going way back to the Windsor McKay days, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just a respect for it. You would think we were heart surgeons, but
well,
it's cartoons.
you look at the masters of the business. Look at the masters of the art, and they are so good. And it's like magic. I mean, it really is. Someone's got a pencil and a piece of paper, and you can see that drawing think. It's easy to make something move. Okay, this is the other thing. It's very easy to make drawings move. That's very easy. Each one's a bit different, and then it'll move. But it's very hard to make a drawing think.
Yes.
And when you see the masters doing that sort of stuff, I mean, it's extraordinary, and it is. It's an appreciation of someone at the top of their game. And when you have a passion and a love for a thing, which I've grown to have since I started doing it and realized it was something I really enjoyed. Once you come to have that, it becomes so important to you and to your life, because it is what you do and how you make your living. Therefore, you do tend to sort of perhaps blow it out of proportion a little bit, I guess, which is why I like to try and step back from it from time to time and look at it and say to myself, no, it is just drawing. In the same way that painting is just painting. Rembrandt was just a painter. He happened to be particularly good, but at the end of the day, he was putting paint on canvas. It gives pleasure to people. It improves people's lives and mental state. We mustn't undervalue what we do by the same token, because what we produce is good for people. Is good for people's well-being, and especially in a time like we're going through at the moment when everyone's soaking up content so much because we can't get out and do, so we're watching a lot more. And if you could make somebody smile and be happy and have an emotional response based on something you've drawn, that's a valuable thing. So it's not, I don't mean to belittle it, I think, by sort of being slightly flippant about it, but it is all about perspective. If you had to sort of put me beside somebody working in an intensive care unit, I know who's the most important person out of those two.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if that person survives and goes home, they're going to want to smile, and if I can do something to make them smile, then it's improved that part of their life. So it's all about perspective, I guess. But
you mentioned being compared to other trades or skills or careers, and sometimes I watch a movie like Deep Impact or something where an asteroid's going to hit the Earth, and they put so many people from different jobs in the safety bunker, right? And I always think, oh, there's no way an animator's getting picked.
Quick, get the animators, put them in the bunker.
Yeah. They pick fine artists and like architects and stuff, but nobody's picking an animator.
So I think we're left outside standing next to the mimes.
Yeah. And we'd be freaking out, but we'd be looking up thinking, oh, look at the way the fire's coming off that. I bet you if I drew that on twos and then switched to ones.
Look at the drag on that.
Yeah. Yeah. But so you mentioned about making a drawing think. Is there a scene early in your career that pops out as the first time you felt you actually achieved that?
Goodness, that's a question, isn't it? Well, gosh. So I was working in commercials through the first sort of bulk of my career, which is mostly about making things move, frankly, and making people laugh and being funny. And I guess when I'd been in the business for a little while, I worked on a series of films that were animated versions of the Beatrix Potter stories of Peter Rabbit and Jeremy Fisher and those, and they were beautiful things. They had a live action intro, then they went into these beautifully handcrafted films that were made to look exactly like Beatrix Potter's illustrations. And I worked on 3 of those, and I guess that was the first time that I can really think of that when I'd been working it, that I felt like I was doing the job that I'd kind of wanted it to be. I mean, the commercials were great, and it was a great way to learn your trade. But these were longer form, they were performance based, and it really felt like I was doing the real thing at that point, I guess. And actually, I think that was even after. Oh God, yeah, that was actually after I'd done the Disney bit for a bit, which was that was fun, and it was great. But it was still comic performance within the movies and the TV stuff we were working.
Right.
Which is fine, but it was still, cartoons, I guess, and it wasn't deep stuff we were doing. We were searching for buried treasure on backs of camels and things. It was great fun.
Yeah.
But the Beatrix Potter ones, it was a slower, gentler pace. It was much more. It was all about the performance, and I guess that was when I suddenly felt, okay, this is the real deal now. And I think that would probably be it. So there's no one particular scene. It was that job.
The overall journey.
The overall journey. Suddenly, it felt like it turned a corner. Yeah.
Right. You started to see a difference in your thought process on a scene, and
it became less about transcribing movement and making laughs, and more about performance and thinking more as an actor rather than as a physical act. Thinking about the performance and the inner monologue of the character, if you like, to sound a bit sort of drama schooly. Did it change how you drew? I guess it changed how I approached the drawing, if you like. Right. I guess. I mean, how you draw obviously changes job to job in a physical way, but just in terms of probably it changed more about the thinking of the scenes before I started drawing. I think once you start drawing, it's the same process in a lot of ways, but it's the thought process that goes into it before you begin that was kind of affected by that. And I just
are you a big thumbnail fan?
Love them, absolutely.
Love 'em.
Yeah. I will transcribe the dialogue. And over the top of the dialogue, I will draw the little performance thumbnails.
Right.
Well, first of all, I'll sit there with my eyes shut for a bit and think about it, and I'll act it out to myself until it feels right. Then I'll jot down little performance thumbnails, and
Right.
then they are what basically I will then rough them up next to the word that they were over, and
Yeah.
test that, see how it feels. And they are, for me, the absolute key. That is the bit when the job is really done, when you're working out that performance there, is the bit where you're getting it right.
And yet that can be, depending the stage of that, it can look like you're doing nothing. I can't tell you the amount of times
Yeah.
my wife has came in and seen me laying on a couch. It's like, I thought you had to work today.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am working.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
No, and it's funny because as years have gone by, obviously there's a lot less hand drawn. I mean, there's been a little resurgence in the last few years, but
Yeah.
I found myself, directing, CG artists and stuff, and
Yeah.
they dive straight in with their computer and start posing it out. And I used to say to the guys, listen, give yourself half a day before you start diving in on your computer and
Yeah.
thumbnail it. You'll thank me, trust me.
Yeah.
And because they're young guys out of college, they've never thought to do that because they've never drawn a thing in their life. They've gone straight in with their computers, which is fine. But when I said to them, thumbnail it out, and they tried it, I said, it just has to be a stick man. It doesn't even have to look like the character. Just think it through and jot it down.
Yeah.
And they tried, and very often they would go, "Oh wow, yeah, that really," and they go, "Yeah, it's almost like I know what I'm talking about."
Almost a little bit.
Almost, yeah. But it is no. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely vital, definitely.
Yeah. And are you like, I talked to James Lopez, and he said he likes to thumbnail sort of big, full page. And then I talked to Ron Husband, who was on the podcast, and he does the most amazing tiny true thumbnails, which is more traditional to what a thumbnail would be. Do you do the small or full page?
I'm a postage stamp guy. Yeah, I like
Yeah, yeah.
like to do them small. I would, as I say, I would literally write out by hand on a piece of paper the dialogue of the scene if I was doing a spoken performance sequence, and I would draw the little drawings above those words. So they are truly tiny. They're 2 or 3 centimeters tall, little sketches just to get that overall shapes, the overall gesture, the overall performance that way. And then you're roughing.
Got a fruit fly in my office, and it's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's not
continue.
buzzing too close to your mic. Very good. People will think you got a hum.
I know.
Yeah, and then obviously roughing it, and I do like to do a pretty rough first pass as well. Once you've got those down, just really bash it out and give it a quick test and see if it works, just to sort of get because once you've done that, and again, this I hate people. It sounds really sort of naff when you say this, but once you've done that, the rest is just drawing.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky enough that drawing is something that comes fairly naturally, then that's fine. It really is that first bit that is the most important bit as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And you mentioned working at Disney. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the Disney projects?
Yeah, I mean it wasn't as grand as it sounds. People often sort of pick on that because it's that famous name, but it was right at the end of the 80s, and they started up a studio in London and one in Paris at the same time, and we were working on DuckTales the movie Treasure of the Lost Lamp, which was actually really good fun. And we had about 18 months, I think, and I was a supervising animator, so I had a team of a couple of assistants under me, and I think there was about 4 or 5 supervisors within these sort of assistant animators and stuff, and the teams down below that, which was really lovely. And we worked on that for a bit, and it was good fun. And then while we were supposed to be waiting for some other movie projects, we worked on a few episodes of some of the TV shows or whatever. And then, to be honest, to this day, I'm not entirely sure what the politics of it were, but the studio was shut down. There was the exchange rate situation. I think also there was a situation that we were being sort of very typically British, going, no, we're going to do it our way. And and I think the studio in Paris were a little bit more they were like, oh yes, okay, yeah, you want it done like that, sure, we'll do that. And I think so they obviously kept the job.
Right.
And so we got shut, which was fine because it was a really nice experience and I loved it. And I went on to do lots of other things after. And in fact, there was a handful of people who got sort of, asked if they'd like to go over to the States and carry on. And I did forget somebody did ask me, would you like to?
Mm-hmm.
But at that moment in time, my father was quite ill, was actually in the process of dying at that point. So I decided to stay in the UK and passed on that. And yeah, and so that sort of sorted out the course of the rest of my life, really.
Did you? That's a tough time. That's something. You've had some tough moments in your life.
Yeah.
Holy. And I don't want to get into the tribute film just yet, although that seems like a natural segue. First, I'd like to ask, during that time when you're asked to go over to America, you're sticking around so you can help take care of your father and stuff. Did you ever brush up with like the Don Bluth productions or the Richard Williams stuff? And how? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I worked very briefly on one of the Bluth ones before that stage, actually. Back in the sort of late commercials days, we worked on, I think myself and some other guys I was in a studio with worked on a little bit on a sequence in When All Dogs Go to Heaven, I think it was. But I think the work we did, I think they changed the design and they redid the sequence. So although I went over to Bluth's and saw the studio and did a little bit of work, it didn't actually happen. Dick was doing The Thief in London and Roger Rabbit and all that sort of stuff. That was Roger Rabbit, wasn't it? But a load of people went to work on that, and I made a choice at that point not to even apply, but I stayed doing commercials at that point, and it was lovely because everyone else had gone to work there, so there was so much work around.
Right.
That I decided to do that. So no, I didn't go and work on any of the big features and stuff. I sort of after the Disney experience and everything like that, I went back into, I sort of fell into the shorts and stuff and did the Beatrix Potter things, and I kind of really enjoyed working on the sort of the short form stuff, and there was a few of those kind of jobs came up one after the other, and I did a bunch of them, and then this sort of came round about the time that things started to change in the business a little bit, and a bit more CG stuff was coming in, and there was a little bit less of the commercials, and I think at that point as well I got asked to sort of layout supervise and do a lot more storyboarding and things like that, so I thought, well, that would be a nice change, so I moved into a load of that, working on series work on that kind of side of things, which let me see it from another angle, as it were, which kind of led into directing as well, and got asked to do a few pilots, and then eventually found myself directing, which is sort of where I sit now.
Do you find that more satisfying than animating?
I think I always feel very jealous of the animators when I'm telling them about a really nice scene that I want them to do.
Right.
Because there's something really lovely about the performance part of animating. But as someone who came from a filmmaking background originally, the thing that I love about directing is you have the overview of the whole project. So you're not just doing the animating, but you're working with the voice artists and talking to the layout and the lighting and the dub and just pulling the whole thing together. And I love that, the creation of the whole. And of course, these days, because a lot of it's CG anyway, the brilliant thing about that is I'm working with people who are much more talented than me at creating that. I don't know what button to press to make anything move on a computer. But I know how it should move. and I understand the performance, so I don't need to be able to do that to direct them, which is kind of nice. So I love that fact that in every department which I'm dealing with, anybody at any of those particular jobs are better than me at that job, but I like the fact I understand all of those and can pull it together. I think that's a really pleasurable bit. But every now and then it's really nice to sort of pick up a pen, or these days a digital pencil, and do a bit of animating again. And funny enough, in the last few years, there's been a little bit more hand animation again to do smaller projects, but kind of fun ones. And I've enjoyed doing a bit of that. So it's nice to get back in touch.
Yeah, for sure. How did you adapt to the digital tools?
Not too bad, actually, because say when it came to animation, when I was still animating, it was still pencil on paper, and then I found myself storyboarding and all that sort of thing, and directing, and that's when the big change happened. So I never had to make that choice, if you like, about trying to train myself to be a digital animator, but the hand drawn wise, TV Paint came out, which is a wonderful bit of kit, and It's basically electric paper.
Yeah.
So the principle is exactly the same as hand animating, and that's what I use for all my hand animation these days, and I love it. So it was, and by the time I started using that, I'd been drawing on a graphic, in a digital screen, for a long time in Sketchbook and Photoshop and stuff. So it was never a real problem. I think it's just like using a different piece of paper or a different pen. It's like when you pick up a piece of watercolor paper or a piece of smooth layout paper or something, it's a different surface. It was just like doing that.
Yeah, TV Paint it's so beautiful to draw in,
It was a game changer. It really was. I absolutely love it. Absolutely.
See, I didn't come across TV Paint until just a few years ago when my first studio job, we were roughing in Flash version 4. And it had a very ugly roughing line, but a beautiful, gorgeous cleanup line, particularly for thick and thin. And but I struggled to get used to, I had this little tiny tablet, like a 5x7 or maybe smaller, off to my side.
I remember those.
So I, drawing on that, staring straight ahead, and on my left arm's trying to manipulate my hotkeys, and it was just weird. Especially since when I showed up, I was expecting, here's your animation table with your disc, here's your paper. And I show up and there was like none of that. I had no previous training in drawing with a tablet. And by the way, you have 30 seconds due at the end of the week. I'm like, oh.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds horribly familiar. Yeah.
So, but I mean, I've only once professionally worked on paper. And that was when I was working at Disney. They let me do a wand ID for the Disney Channel, and they let me animate it on paper. And you would have thought I had brought the most amazing tools from the Smithsonian or whatever, because I brought my portable table in, I set it up, I MacGyvered a pencil test machine. I can't tell you the amount of pencil test machines I've made over the years. And I had this whole setup in the hallway, and all the animators, they would just stop by so often because they were like, wow, how are you? They had no previous, everything had been digital in their career path, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah,
I do miss the sensation of rolling the paper through the fingers.
Oh, the sound of it,
the flipping of it, and the sound and just the organic nature of that, and for all the digital flippy backwards and forwards in TV Paint, that's the one thing I really miss, and I think that's you could really hone the craft that way. But the great thing is, having done that for years and years and years and years and years, when it comes to digital stuff now, there's an inbuilt sense of timing and understanding of that, and it's just a slightly different approach. You're coming at it from a slightly different angle, but at the end of the day, it's still basically the same principle. So, it's nice to have that, all those years of background in the sort of analog version. Really, I think it's very.
The more
helpful.
experience in the old techniques, the better the animator is.
Well, I also find as well, sometimes people sort of turn to the computer for sort of answers for things. And sometimes I say, well, I know when we used to do this the old-fashioned way, we used to do that and slide that behind that. Why don't we just do 2 layers and do a thing? And treating the computer stuff like paper sometimes gets very quick, very good results, rather than very complicated, solutions, which, gorgeous as they could look, you're just thinking, can't you just slide that over that?
What did you think of the film Klaus when it came out?
I loved it.
Yeah, me too.
I absolutely loved it. It was beautiful.
Me too.
I think that was a very clever melding of the art forms, to sort of create that look. They really nailed it, and it was nicely animated, and it was a nice story. I mean, it was a great movie.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I'd like more.
I know, that's I'm left with, what next? Like Spa Studios to me right now is kind of like Disney back in the old days. Like, you just don't know what the next big thing is going to be coming out of them. And it's going to, the one thing you do know is it's going to be visually stunning. And chances are,
I haven't sat down and watched one of the next things on my list to watch, and I keep sort of trying to find the the day I'm in the mood to watch it is Wolf Walkers, which looks
Yes.
stunning.
Yeah.
That's the next thing on my list to watch, because I think that's gonna make me sort of sit there and slightly dribble.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about the tribute film you did for your wife. And earlier I mentioned, you've been through some real hard moments in your personal life that have affected your career. And one of them was the passing of your wife. And in response to that, or maybe in defiance of that, you created this beautiful short film that was a tribute, and so full of emotion. And like, you don't need to be an animator to appreciate that. As you have to draw so many drawings to get a second of animation, up to 24 drawings if it's 24 frames per second. And so every drawing you're working on is an instant reminder in real time of what you just went through.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
It was quite a process. Yeah, it was well, she died in 2017. She was 41 and she had sepsis, and she was there one day and gone the next, and it was a bit of a life-changing moment. Obviously, it's an absolute shock to the system, and 2 young children, 7 and 10. So I was suddenly a single dad with 2 young kids and a gaping hole in the house and the heart, So I'd been drawing every night for about a year and a half, a little sort of doodle diary at that point. I used to put out every day just for fun, and I kept doing the drawings, but they became a sort of self-counseling way of getting through my grief, and it's examining my life as I went. And I found that doing the drawing every night was like a mindfulness moment. It could unpack that day, and I could sleep once I'd done the drawing, sort of letting out my feelings. And they became popular and got noticed by the press, and I did loads of interviews and stuff. And then a TV show over here called The One Show, which is a sort of tea time magazine program, asked me would I go on the show to talk about the drawings, and would I be interested in doing a film based on them. So that was the impetus for it, was because the drawings existed, but then when they said you're doing a film, I thought, that would be actually a really nice thing to do. So I found a piece of music that she'd composed and played, and I animated to that. And we did a little bit of backstory at the beginning, and then it kind of brought to life some of the doodles that had sort of got me to that point, which when I went on the show was about a year after she died. So it was looking at that first year of being a widower through that prism of just little moments. And I do the sketches on brown paper, so the animation was on brown paper, and it was very simple, black line on brown paper with a little bit of white highlighting. And I did it mostly on 3s actually for that.
You can't really tell.
Just take me
you
forever.
Can't really tell.
Well, that's lovely.
your
Thank
spacing
you.
is so beautiful. So.
Thank you. I guess that's the old animator in me coming out, understanding the basic timing of it. And I thought I'll do it on 3s because I just don't have the time, or indeed they're not paying me the sort of money to do it on 2s or 1s. So it's done on 3s, which gives it a slightly dreamlike quality, I suppose, as well. Possibly the movement isn't slick and smooth, but the memories aren't. And it is all about memory and about the sketchiness. So that's what it was. And you're right, doing those drawings over and over, and she figures in the drawings over and over and over as well. And every time it drew it, it was like a little blowing her a kiss and a memory and a moment.
I would imagine that would be the case. Like she's whispering in your ear through. Yeah.
Totally. And it's kind of how I feel in my life anyway. And doing the drawings of her over and over, it felt like she was there. But it also, every time you drew one, it just exorcised another little piece of that grief as well. And so by the time the film was finished, and I could sit and look at it without crying, because it's funny, all the time I was working on it, the professional part of my brain was working on it really. But then when I would sit back and look at it, that's when the emotional part of me would tap into it. So that it was almost like 2 different me's working on the project, the one who looked at it and the one who drew it. But there came a point, I've done it enough times that I could look at it objectively as well. And I was very pleased how it turned out. And I mean, it had an incredible response on the show and online. I know it's been viewed like over 12 million times or something, which is ridiculous.
How did your kids react to it?
They well, I mean, they thought they love the film. They love the drawings anyway. The diaries, they look at them every day, and they love that. And for them, it's like a little memory, and they just think it's hilarious that they're in a film,
right.
that it was on the telly, and I was on the telly, and they just thought that was kind of quite funny. But they. The whole point with them and with the drawing and about the whole process we've been through is I've been very open with them from day one, and we've never shied away from the subject and never sort of brushed it under the carpet, and I've encouraged them to be open emotionally and everything. And so it's for them, it's another part of the life that we now have. So they kind of took it in their stride in a way, like they do pretty much everything, which is great, really.
It's such an amazing well, I mean, I don't know if another word. Tribute doesn't seem to be big enough because I can imagine what you must have felt working on it, but then the fantastical side of my thinking imagines what your wife would think of it watching you work on it. Well,
she'd be touched emotionally by it, but she'd also find the whole thing so surreal that she's out there. And I mean, she was called Joy, which is so I mean, and the film is about joy. And I've had a book come out, a collection of the doodles, and it's called Finding Joy. And my whole journey it's been 3 years now, and the whole journey has been about finding joy in my life again, and to know that she's become synonymous with this journey of what I call positive grieving. She would find the whole thing quite bizarre and faintly embarrassing, probably.
Well, it's one hell of a way to be immortalized. If we're going to be translated into a bunch of zeros and ones, what a great way to be represented that way. I mean,
I'm very pleased because it does sort of really.
Yeah.
It tribute is a lovely word, actually. Yeah, I've never really known what to categorize it as, but I guess it is. It is a tribute, and it's I'm pleased. It provokes the right emotions in me, and I think in people watching, because it does move people. But it's although it's about loss, it's also about positivity, and positivity through loss, and I think, and about love, and about how the enduring quality of love, and the fact that grief is basically, you wouldn't grieve if you didn't love somebody. Grief is love. It's the love for somebody who's no longer there. So
there's
it's the expression of love, really.
There's been 2 animated shorts that both of them have not been super refined in that there's a full ink and paint process done it, like Princess and the Frog level, right? Yours and when Glenn Keane did Duet, because the love story of me and my wife is so in parallel to what happens in Duet, and the watching yours, to imagine the pain you, because I would be demolished if anything happened to my wife. Both those made me cry the first time I watched. It's just. Is so powerful, and you say we're just doing drawings, but at some point a drawing becomes more than what it is.
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, and I think I guess the looking at it objectively as well, my little film is an example of how a thing doesn't have to be smooth and polished and perfect to move, and talk about seeing a drawing think, or seeing a drawing be able to move you. It's about where it's come from and about the truth in that drawing. And I think that's the secret to do it. It's the secret of acting and the secret of animation, is to find a truth. And because the film itself is coming from a place of truth and from the heart, I guess, it is rough around the edges. But yeah, I guess that's the quality of it that moves people, is knowing it's a true story and knowing that the emotions you're seeing in the characters are truthful. And it's about, on a technical level, it's about an angle of a head. And I always think back to, there was a lovely scene it's in The Rescuers, isn't it, when the little girl's sitting in the in the place all on her own, and you see her from the back, and you know exactly what she's feeling by the angle of her head. And it's that same thing, it's getting an angle right on a drawing, however loose and rough it is, says a lot. And I think there's that element to it. So yeah. Oh, thank you. But anyway, that's lovely lovely to hear. It's
Oh,
very,
yeah, and
very
you
tough.
know, I don't want to stay on too long. I know it's a sensitive subject, but I
No,
just want to let you know that it really struck me, and you know how much I appreciated it. So yeah,
oh,
yeah.
bless you. Well, it's very kind, and hearing that sort of thing is it fills the heart, which is lovely, and knowing that it touches people, it helps
Hmm.
me as well. It's all part of my healing
Yeah,
process. So
yeah,
thank you for
yeah,
that. That's really
absolutely.
nice.
So, post the release of that film, you're on this whirlwind circuit of doing interviews, and you know, um, but at the same time, you got to pay the bills too. So I
Yeah,
assume other
yeah,
projects pop up, and
yeah.
what type of thought process did you have to go to get ready for them? Was working on that film enough of a therapeutic session to get you back in that frame of mind?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of was back at work, or I mean, to be honest, I went back to work a week after she
Oh,
died because I kind of needed
yeah,
to,
yeah.
both financially, although the people I was working for were amazing, but also she knew that I love my work, and she would have said, you can grieve when you can grieve, but also do your work because it's going to help pull you
Hmm.
through. And when you have a job that you love, um, it's part of your process. If I was away from the work as well as having lost her, that would have been a double whammy. And going back to work was part of the
Hmm.
healing process. I mean, I my hours, I sort of didn't sort of go flat out full time, and mostly working from
Hmm.
home, which was useful, obviously being around for my kids and stuff. But it was yeah. I mean, it's a job I love. Therefore, it's not a job. It's what I
Hmm.
do. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
So actually, the work continued through it, but doing the film kind of alongside the job as well, that kind of was definitely part of the healing, to sort of going to opening up to other
Yeah.
things, I suppose. That
Yeah.
yeah.
And when
So
you're working on the new projects now, even today, are you working primarily as a director, or do you still jump in every once in a while and say, "Oh, I'm going to take that scene for myself"?
if I'm working on something that's
Yeah,
hand drawn, I will jump in occasionally. Or if I'm working on a if I'm working on a project where I can squeeze in something hand drawn any way that I
yeah,
can, I will, and then do it if I can, because I just love getting my hands on it. And I'll board. And when I'm doing notes for animators, especially when you're working with foreign studios and
yeah,
stuff like that, a lot of my notes will be in drawn
yeah,
form. You'll get the QuickTime movie in of the footage or whatever, and I'll pull it in and I'll draw over the bits I want to change rather than trying to describe it in words. I'll kind of rekey it
yeah,
over the
yeah,
top. So it's nice to be able to do that, I guess. So yeah, I do like to draw
yeah.
wherever I can still on jobs, and then alongside the sort of directing work and stuff, there are little projects that come in that are sort of drawn projects. Funny enough, off the back of the tribute film, I've been contacted by several people to say, "Oh, we love that. We got this little project we want to do. And we thought something like that would be really nice, to that sort of style." And I've done small but very nice jobs that have kind of been inspired by
Yeah.
that. Um, I'm doing some at the moment, and it's kind of nice to do. And I've got little side projects of my own that are sort of evenings and weekends
Hmm.
stuff that are animating as well, to keep. It's almost like doing that film. That was the longest sustained bit of animation I guess I've done in a while, apart from the scenes on a couple
Hmm.
of things, and it kind of re-inspired me to sort of animate again. Really, after being directing for
Hmm.
years, it was. I suddenly went, oh, actually, I am an animator at heart, and so I every opportunity I can find to do a little
Yeah.
bit, I do.
Very, very nice. I relate to that a lot. Although I do find in my career right now, I'm actually coming to the realization, with the help of my wife pointing it out to me. I'm not actually an animator. And what I mean by that is I always wanted to be as a kid and worked the jobs, and I've done a bunch of it. But what really gets me is directing and storyboarding and design. Those are, and it
Yeah.
took her point. She's like, "You're not an animator." I'm like, "Whoa! First of all, we're about to have a conversation. Where do you get off saying I'm not? And she's like, babe, listen, I can see it. I've seen it for a long time. You're not an animator. She goes, you're a storyteller. And she said, remember, think about how fast ideas just, and how excited you get talking about them, and how down in the dumps you get when, the workload of having to animate them comes around. And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, okay, well, how many of your properties have you created that have stopped once they were ready for animation? And the answer is almost all of them, right? So I had this crisis of truth, and now I'm in the process of shifting my career over into producing, directing, and that kind of thing. And I'm happier for it. However, I still really love opportunities that come up where I have to do a draw over or something like that.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? When you're having to do it all day, every day, like any job, I mean, there can be a point when you go, oh, this is quite hard work. And then you have to stop and think, well, at the end of the day, it's drawing. But it can be, quite, sometimes you just go, oh, I'm so tired. My neck really aches, and I'm just doing these tiny changes and you want to tell a bigger story, and you say you are a storyteller. And I think I come from exactly the same place. I think I can totally relate to that. I think that's what I think of myself as, which is why illustration, animation, I do some theatre work. It's all, I've done a bit of voice acting recently. Wow. It's all storytelling. It's all, everything I do kind of leans towards that, I guess. And, but there is the animator inside always, and yes, and I love directing, and it's great fun, but there is a certain itch that only gets scratched by getting that pencil and making that character move yourself. But there's also a certain relief in knowing you don't have to animate the entire scene. You're like, oh, I just need to correct these poses for him, and you just get to do the fun bit.
But anyway, I think we're good to end it there. I don't want to keep you from your day any more than I have to, but I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
It's been really lovely chatting. Thank you. I've really
fantastic.
enjoyed it.
And if it's okay, do you mind if I put shots of the film throughout the edit? Okay.
Cool.
Great.
No, dude. Please feel free. I mean, anything you can see anywhere that you want to sort of stick in, please
fantastic. I'll do that. Great. I don't know when this episode will release, but when it does, I'll let you know. I'll give you the link, and if you want to share it, I'm always thankful for that. But
sure I will. I'm sure I will.
But no, this has been great. Thank you.
That's been lovely.
Create when you're drawn to it, drawn to it. Get creative and flex imagination. Write a song, you might hear it on a station. Do a painting of some pigs